I'll look at my phone every now and then and go on like Instagram or something and look at a couple videos. And then I'll see the most crazy, outlandish thing, or I'll read one comment and it makes me really wonder, are people actually like this? Do people genuinely think like this, act like this, are this stupid, this mean, and overall just so detached from everything in the world? There are around 8 billion people on the planet, and it is said that there are 5.66 billion social media users, which is around 62% of the planet. So basically, majority of us are on our phones on social media at some point. Like that, then it puts us in a really tough spot, and worse than I thought. And it just paints a picture of the state of the world that we live in. So I sought to figure it out. Is the internet real life? Or more accurately, can it represent people as a whole? Or in the case of my argument, can it represent Americans? Can the internet truly represent a group of people? And on top of that, do these people even argue over and talk about real things? Or is it just random internet information that's been recycled over and over again? To determine whether the internet could actually represent us all, I had to figure out how much people are actually interacting on the internet. So I went on a search to find a study that would give me the percentage of people that actually comment and interact on social media platforms like X, Instagram, and TikTok, compared to how much people actually use the apps themselves, to determine whether majority of people are interacting or not. And I just couldn't find any information that was trustworthy enough. And the ones I did find were on things totally unrelated to what I was looking for. So when I found out, I'd be like, hey, this is perfect. But this has nothing to do with what I need. So I can't confidently say that blank amount of people are interacting on the internet. But what I did find is that majority of the sources said that 90% of people on the internet are lurkers. What's funny about that is that dates back to a study done in like 2006, done by Jacob Nielsman, and the study is over 20 years old. So based on modern methodologies, I shouldn't use a study that's over 10 years old, so I decided to scrap it. When I decided to figure out how much people are on these platforms in general and what percentage of those people use them for certain things. And even though I wouldn't be able to figure out exactly how much people are interacting, I would be able to figure out what majority of people use social media for. And if those people are the majority of Americans or the minority of Americans. But luckily, I found the perfect information. And here's what I found. According to Pew Research, 197 million people have Facebook, 172 have Instagram, 136 have TikTok, and 104 have X. While these don't represent how much people are actively on the app, like every day or every month, they do represent how much people have it. So they probably include fake accounts or stuff like that. But I'm not 100% sure, but I'll put it on the screen. So before I could figure out how I was going to use those numbers, I decided to pivot on the other question I had, which is, do people argue over real information? Or basically, is the information on social media / the internet even real? And it led me back to a source I found in my Are People Dumber video, which basically said that false news spreads faster than real news. While that doesn't really answer the question, it does give some insight on it, as if there's more false / misinformation on the internet, it'd be more likely that there's less real conversations and just more stuff over fake information. So I decided to see if I could find a more real answer. And shortly into it, I realized that this is literally almost impossible, as how am I gonna determine if the internet is fact or fiction or not if I'm using the internet? So it's just like an endless loop of if the information I find is real or not. So I decided to scrap it. But let me track back to the research I referenced before and explain a little bit more about misinformation to see if I can get an answer through that. To explain, the study I was referencing took 126,000 Twitter stories over 11 years and measured how true and false information spreads. And it turns out false information spreads 6 times faster than true information. And bots were not the cause. So this means that people were a majority spreading this false information. And on top of that, in another study done on 2.8 million Twitter URLs, they found that 59% of the people that shared the URLs never actually clicked on them. So they saw a headline, thought it was interesting, and just proceeded to share it. So this just displays how much misinformation can happen on the internet. But back to my point, is the internet real? Well, from doing so much statistical research, staring at graphs, charts, looking at a million different sample sizes that I wouldn't even use, I began to wonder how a small group of people can represent the entire American population. So I decided to research sample sizes. And to give a literal definition, sample size is the number of patients or other investigated units that will be included in a study and required to answer the research hypothesis in the study. And to add on, these studies perfectly pick the right set of people that can represent everybody, in a sense by including people of different backgrounds, races, ages, and all sorts of other things. They can actually give you a representation of the population, which led me to a correlation between sample sizes and social media, as both have a wide range of different people interacting with each other. And on top of that, social media has 10 times the amount of people that the average sample size would have. But why? Is it that social media isn't used as a place for study? What's this? I wonder what's in here. And it was because of the savior of my research, online disinhibition. I definitely didn't say that right, but it's okay. And I know you probably can't see this, but it's okay. Because it's online dishibitation. Online disinhibition is basically the idea that there are 6 distinct psychological factors that influence how people act differently online rather than do face-to-face, coined by a psychologist named John Suller in 2004. To explain the 6 factors are: the first factor is dissociative anonymity, which is basically when people are online without their real face or name, they psychologically separate their online actions from their real identity. So they essentially be like, this is the online me and this is the real me. The second factor is invisibility, and this goes beyond just being anonymous. It's about the fact that you generally cannot see or be seen by another person. So it completely takes off the facial expression and body language and tone of voice part of a conversation. The third factor is asynchronicity, which is how online communication is almost never in real time. So you know how you'll text somebody and they'll be like, and they won't respond for like a day? Basically, that's the idea. So you can post something, walk away, and I don't have to sit there and wait for a response for someone to be like, oh, this was good, or oh, this is bad, like it is in real life. I can just post it and leave. The fourth factor is solipsistic introjection, which is the most psychologically interesting one. When you're reading text online, your brain fills the gaps, so you don't hear the other person's actual voice. So your mind assigns the voice, personality, and tone and projections. And Fuller argued that this makes online interactions feel less like talking to a real separate human being and more like interacting with a character your own mind partly constructed, which is kind of crazy. And the fifth factor is dissociative imagination, which is the idea that some people unconsciously treat online spaces as if they operate under different rules than the real world, almost like it's like a video game or a fictional space that isn't real. The sixth factor is minimization of status and authority. In real life, social hierarchies are constantly visible and enforced. You dress differently, speak differently, and carry yourself differently depending on whether you're talking to your boss, a stranger, or a close friend. Those status cues keep a lot of behavior in check. Online, literally everything disappears. A teenager can speak like a CEO to a CEO of a company with no consequence to anybody. And because of those 6 things, even if one of those happens, it totally throws the viability of using social media or internet as a sample size, meaning there's no way at all that they're good means of representing the population. But what percentage of Americans actually use social media? Because if it's something like 90%, that means there's at least 1,000 people that are different races, genders, wealth equalities, and also don't have those 6 things happening. Well, thankfully, according to the research I found, 1 in 2 Americans have Facebook, 1 in 2 Americans have Instagram, 2 in 5 Americans have TikTok, and 1 in 3 Americans have Twitter. You might be looking at the 50% and think, well, that should be more than enough. Well, according to Pew Research, a lot of these are spread out across race, gender, ages, and all of that. So none of them would actually be accurate enough to be used as a representation of the American population. And since there's millions of people on social media, it'd be almost impossible for me to find any sort of research that could give me an answer on what people exactly use social media for. So I needed to hone in on what exactly I needed to find that people use social media for. And that would be the news, as it's what I feel like has the most real impact on the real world. As if you see fake news on the internet, it can actually genuinely affect how you think of people in real life. But how much people actually use the news? Well, according to Pew Research, 53% of adults sometimes get the news from social media, which is a kind of odd way of saying it, but they can't outright say that this many people get the news from there daily. But let's break it down. So 53% of Facebook users use it to get news. 41% of Gram users get news from there. 55% of TikTok users get news from there. And 57% of X users get news from there. So what is that in the population? So 1/3 of Americans use for news 1 in 5 Americans use Gram for news. 1 in 5 Americans use for news. And 1 in 6 Americans use X for news. Then that's based on the amount of people in America and how much people use Facebook for news. So it's 104 million here and 341 million here. So 104% of 341 million is about 30 to 31%, rounded up or not rounded. So that averages to a simplification of 1/3 of Americans. I did that for each of them. So it's easy to understand. And a lot of these people overlap, so it isn't a very accurate way of representing everybody. And like I said before, it isn't an even distribution. And on top of that, because of the online dishabitation effect, these people aren't acting like they usually do. And even if they do, there's not enough of them to actually represent everybody. So, to wrap it all up, the internet, in fact, is not real. And if it was real, I'd be really sad, because that means there's a lot of hateful, ignorant, stupid, and dumb people like that on the internet and in real life. But luckily, it isn't like that. And hopefully, the people that are actually like that are a very small percentage. To add on to that, to answer the other question, the internet information is just full of a bunch of misinformation. So just be careful out there and fact check everybody you see, including me, because it helps me do my videos better. So hopefully you liked this video, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and put any cool video ideas or questions you have in the comments. Peace out.